Hello. Woo! So, okay. I was a junior in high school when I met him. And like all great love stories, ours does begin at church camp. At the time, my childhood camp was running a wicked scam called Spring Work Retreat. We would pay $75 for the chance to find love at the dance in exchange for a full day of hard labor. Most of us got our money's worth. However, I am still paying for that weekend in embarrassment and emotional turmoil that even 20 years later has not fully subsided. In the early 90s, Springdale High School was significantly less diverse than it is today. As a matter of fact, it churned out as many white supremacists as it did graduates. And when I arrived at camp that weekend, Black culture and those who rip it off to create an identity for themselves was completely unfamiliar to me. I was impressed. When he strutted up to me that Saturday after we completed our chores, "Sup, girl?" He had ice blue eyes, he was tall and blonde, and he thought he was the shit. In a sea of privileged white kids, this Wangster from godforsaken Pine Bluff seemed dangerous. He had infiltrated our waspy church camp as the guest of a PK, that's a priest kid if you've not been to church camp. He wore bright purple Nikes, baggy overalls with one strap dangling precariously at his waist. His baseball cap was turned sideways. How could she resist? I was experienced in every way but one. I had a sharp tongue and a mean streak that kept most people at bay. I had an ex-boyfriend who once divulged to a third party that he would have liked to have kissed me, but he was afraid I might punch him in his face. But at camp that weekend, the tables were turned, and I met my match that Saturday night at the dance. And when the smooth tones of Boys to Men came across the stereo, he didn't ask me to dance, he told me to dance, and I did not hesitate. After that weekend, I never went a day without talking to him, often for hours on the phone. And while I wandered the halls of my high school with the ropers, and basked in the ever-present stench of chicken shit, he lived in the world where the Crips and the Bloods had become a major presence. I had spent little to no time in Southeast Arkansas, so naturally I did not question his claims of affiliation. He was tough, streetwise, and I loved it. 1 month later, the church brought us together again and again. You see, I traveled to Little Rock one weekend a month to represent my church on the youth council. And when I wasn't participating in bringing God to the youth of Arkansas, I was making out with a wannabe gangster and learning how to do this. For those of you who don't know, that is the gang sign for the Bloods, which to this day I can throw without hesitation, and often am encouraged to. So we made a plan for a lover's getaway, and after losing my virginity in a hotel that I still have to drive past on a daily basis and would love to blow up, I was hooked on him. My picture of his life came into focus during several trips to Pine Bluff on the pretense of visiting another friend from church camp, whose father was also a priest. These trips were sanctioned and happily approved by my stepmother. She couldn't wait to send me down there and let me soak up all the holiness I could absorb in one weekend. In truth, I was having sex in his Bronco, meeting his Wangster friends and being introduced to his family. He was the only member of his family who had not succumbed to obesity and an addiction to diamonds. His mother and 2 sisters were covered in them like disco balls. And they didn't seem to acknowledge how special I was or how much we were in love, so we didn't spend a lot of time with him, which meant more time in the Bronco, which was fine with me. That fall, I began my senior year in high school, and he moved to Little Rock to attend college, when he wasn't busy with the duties associated with being a gang leader. And most weeks, I received letters and poems expressing his undying love and devotion to me. These came by post in a mailbox. They were real. Naturally, these were precious, but the greatest treasure he ever sent me was a homemade video documenting a day in his life while he visited Pine Bluff on a Saturday. Through the magic of a VHS player, I saw him visiting his fat family, driving around his old hood, chatting with his friends, listening to rap, and licking a spoon of ice cream seductively, while dreamily telling me that he's thinking about me. The finale of the video was a choreographed dance he and his best friend performed while lip-syncing. The only line I remember, and this I will never forget, so I walked up to her with the interest just to do her. Let's talk about red flags, because this guy was throwing them as often as he threw gang signs. The first red flag was thrown at my best friend, and she didn't tell me until many years later, but at church camp, on our way to chapel, he had pinched her vagina. He acted like he was aiming for her ass and missed, but according to her, her ass is way too big to miss. So this was obviously an assault, and she wanted to wait till he was completely out of the picture before she talked about it. And then once while riding around in his Bronco, a gun slid out from underneath my seat and landed between my feet, and I looked at it and I thought, Pine Bluff is a rough town. Red flag ignored. There were many more, really too many to list, but I have my own red flag, and it led to our demise. I'm Snoopy. I can't help it. My parents had a lot of secrets, and I had to find out what they were. So this led to a habit of digging through drawers and closets and boxes throughout most of my youth and young adulthood. So when he left me alone in his apartment, I waited until his car disappeared, and I went straight to his bedroom. There, under the bed, I discovered boxes of letters, recent letters, some of them just days old, from girls all over the state of Arkansas. It would seem that he had one of me in every town, and I would later find out he collected most of our virginities. It was something that he was actually known for, a good friend from church camp told me about 5 years later. Thanks. My best friend rushed over. We read through them and we plotted. He would have to be confronted, but not before he paid for at least 2 more of my meals. And he did have a gun. That red flag had registered somewhere, because I waited until I was a 3-hour drive away before I confronted him. He was less than guilt-stricken when I made my accusations. Essentially, he loved me. He loved us all. I was part of his stable, and I could love it or I could leave it. And although I was reluctant, like for real, and heartbroken, like I cried for days, I left it. And for 2 years, this was an embarrassing but emotional moment, but educational moment in my love life. I learned that wannabe gangsters are a stain on society, and that Pine Bluff is no one's vacation destination. And about the time I had almost recovered my dignity, and my friends had stopped mocking me mercilessly, we got the news. My ex-boyfriend, the one all of my friends from all over the state knew from church camp, had been convicted of murder. He shot a woman at point-blank range, then loaded her into the back of the very same Bronco we had copulated in. He then enlisted his best friend, Pookie, to help him dump her body in a river in an attempt to hide the evidence. Thankfully, he was as dumb as he was violent, and the body missed the river and was discovered on an embankment the next day. He had friends and family members in police agencies, but he was easily convicted and sent to prison. But he received a very light prison sentence, most likely because the victim was black and presumed to be a drug addict. And acting like a black gangster when you're white is nothing but an act. I'm assuming he probably dropped that act when he was in the courtroom. Yeah. Another year passed, and the horror began to fade, but not completely, when the phone rang. And at the time, I lived in a house with 2 roommates, and we had quite a few people over all the time. So someone, I don't know who, answered the phone and accepted a collect call from Cummings State Farm. Yeah. I went back to my bedroom and picked up the phone, and I knew who it was before he even told me, just by the way he said my name. He wanted to tell me that he loved me. He had always loved me. He said he was on the inside, but when he got on the outside, he wanted us to be married. It's my first marriage proposal. I wondered how many of these phone calls he had made before he had hunted down my phone number. I very politely red flagged for what it is. We could be in serious danger.